Welcome, curious souls, to a place where reality bends and the impossible becomes eerily familiar. Here in the shadows between what we know and what we fear, stories await that will challenge your perception of the world around you. Each tale invites you to step beyond the veil of the ordinary, where strange occurrences have no easy explanation, and the lines between nightmare and waking life blur into unsettling harmony. From psychological terrors to supernatural encounters, our carefully curated collection offers a window into worlds just adjacent to our own, worlds where the rules we take for granted no longer apply. So dim your lights, silence your phone, and prepare to journey into the unknown with us, and glimpse into madness. The desert at night held an oppressive silence that weighed heavier than the stifling heat. 100 degrees after sundown and not a whisper of breeze to offer relief. Cassie kept her arm dangling out the passenger window, fingers splayed to catch what little air rushed past, her wedding band catching moonlight in quick, desperate flashes. "How much farther?" she asked, twisting the gold band with her thumb, a habit formed in just 24 hours of marriage. Mark kept his eyes fixed on the narrow stretch of asphalt, cutting through endless darkness. His knuckles were white against the steering wheel. "Couple hours, maybe. We should have stopped back in Lordsburg." Cassie shifted in her seat, the vinyl sticking to her bare legs. "We couldn't," she said with a lightness that felt forced even to her own ears. "Daddy would have looked there first." The word daddy hung between them. Another presence in the car. Mark's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. They had been driving for 14 hours straight, stopping only for gas and bathroom breaks at isolated stations where nobody would remember their faces. The desert seemed to stretch impossibly onward, a vast nothing punctuated by scrub brush and distant mesas that never seemed to draw closer. Cassie was 19. Mark was 21. The elopement had been her idea, a wild, impulsive solution to her father's iron-fisted disapproval. Her fingers found the photograph tucked into the sun visor, her mother on her wedding day, looking impossibly young. Dead now for 3 years. "I just need coffee," Mark muttered, more to himself than to her, "something to keep me awake." The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m. when the darkness ahead suddenly broke. A rectangle of light bloomed in the distance, sharp-edged and impossible against the black horizon. "What is that?" Cassie leaned forward, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. As they drew closer, neon light took shape, a sign hovering above a low, flat building. "Alton's Diner," it pronounced in electric blue and pink, the letters pulsing gently like a heartbeat. In the middle of nowhere? Mark slowed the car, his brow furrowing. Cassie's hand found his knee, squeezing lightly. "Who cares? They'll have coffee," she said. "I'm starving." Mark hesitated, then turned into the small empty parking lot. The diner looked too pristine for its surroundings, all gleaming chrome and polished windows, untouched by the dust that covered everything else for miles. "Weird place for a restaurant," Mark said, killing the engine. "Truckers must come through here." But there were no trucks, no other cars at all, just stillness and that humming neon. The air conditioner hit them like a blessing as they pushed through the glass door. Inside was a perfect vision of a 1950s diner. Red vinyl booths, checkerboard floor tiles in black and white, a jukebox in the corner playing something low and crooning. The entire place smelled of coffee and vanilla and something else, something faintly metallic. A chime announced their entrance, and a man appeared from a swinging door behind the counter. He was tall and impossibly thin, dressed in a crisp white shirt and black tie, his silver hair slicked back from a severe angular face. His smile didn't touch his eyes. "Welcome, welcome," he said, voice smooth as polished stone. "Please, sit anywhere you like." They chose a booth by the window, though there was nothing to see outside but their own reflections against darkness. "Coffee, please," Mark said immediately, "and water." Cassie fidgeted with the paper napkin dispenser, avoiding the man's piercing stare. "The same," she added, though something in his steady gaze made her want to look away. "Of course," he nodded. "And to eat, our special tonight is quite fulfilling." "What is it?" Cassie asked. "Different for everyone." The man's smile widened a fraction. "I'm Alton. This is my establishment." Mark shifted uncomfortably. Do you have a menu? Alton clasped his hands before him, the skin stretched too tight across his knuckles. No need, he replied. I know exactly what will satisfy you both, but first, he leaned slightly closer. Every guest here pays a different price. For you lovebirds, only a whispered truth each, paid in full before you leave. Cassie laughed nervously, the sound dying quickly in the still air. A truth? A secret, Alton clarified, one finger tapping rhythmically against his wrist. One each. Whispered to me, not to each other. Marriage should have some mystery, shouldn't it? Mark's posture stiffened visibly. That's a strange payment system. Alton's smile didn't budge. My diner, my rules. The meal is worth it, I assure you. Unless you'd prefer to continue your journey? The next establishment is some 70 miles ahead. Cassie's stomach growled audibly. Fine, whatever, Mark said. Excellent. Alton straightened. I'll prepare your meals in the meantime. He gestured to the empty booths on opposite sides of the diner. If you would each take a moment to consider your payment, when I return, I'll collect. He disappeared through the swinging door before either could respond. They moved to separate booths as instructed. Cassie slid into the red vinyl seat and immediately felt a strange heaviness descend upon her. The music from the jukebox seemed to fade, replaced by a soft, persistent static. Alton appeared beside her booth, silent as a shadow. Your payment, please, he said. And suddenly, inexplicably, Cassie felt compelled to speak. Sometimes I wonder if I married Mark just to spite my father, she whispered. I'm not even sure I love him. Alton smiled. Thank you. Your meal will be ready shortly. Across the diner, Mark whispered something as well. She couldn't hear, but Alton nodded with the same cold satisfaction. Moments later, food appeared. Her mother's blueberry pancakes, Mark's favorite steak and eggs, rich coffee, warm comfort. But then, the questions began, and neither of them would be able to stop what followed. Halfway through their meal, Mark stopped, eyes drifting away from his plate. Why did you really want to marry me, Cassie? He asked suddenly, his voice strange and hollow. The question struck her like a physical blow. What? Why are you asking that now? His eyes finally met hers, and they were different somehow. Harder, more distant, with something unfamiliar lurking in their depths. Just answer. She twisted her wedding band nervously. Because I love you, she said automatically, but the words felt wrong in her mouth, sour and false. The jukebox switched songs again, another love ballad but warped somehow, the singer's voice stretched and distorted. Let's just finish and go, Cassie said, pushing her pancakes away. She wasn't hungry anymore. They ate in silence, punctuated only by the increasingly strange music and the occasional howl of coyotes sounding closer each time. When they finally stood to leave, Alton appeared at their table, collecting their plates with graceful efficiency. How much do we owe you? Mark asked, reaching for his wallet. Alton smiled that empty smile again. The meal's on the house? Congratulations on the nuptials. As they walked to the door, Cassie glanced back. Alton stood watching them, perfectly still, his thin figure silhouetted against the bright lights of the kitchen behind him. Back in the car, the stifling heat returned immediately. Mark cranked the engine and blasted the air conditioning, but it seemed to make little difference. They drove in silence for several miles, the diner's neon glow fading in the rearview mirror until darkness swallowed it completely. What did you tell him? Cassie finally asked. For your payment. He shook his head. Nothing important. Mark's voice was flat, emotionless, his profile rigid in the dim light. Then why won't you tell me? She turned to face him, tucking one leg beneath her on the seat. Why should I? We all have secrets, right, Cassie? He turned to her briefly, his face half illuminated by the dashboard lights. Even newlyweds. Something cold slithered down Cassie's spine. She wrapped her arms around herself. What's that supposed to mean? Mark's hands tightened on the wheel again, knuckles whitening. Nothing. Forget it. But the silence that followed wasn't the comfortable quiet of their earlier drive. It buzzed with unspoken words, with thoughts too dangerous to voice. You've been acting strange ever since we left, Cassie said after another mile of terrible silence. If you didn't want to run away with me, he interrupted her. I never said that. She picked at a loose thread on her jeans. Then what is it? Are you having second thoughts? Mark's laugh was short and bitter, echoing in the confined space. Second thoughts? No, I'm way past second thoughts. She could see something cold in his eyes, something she had never seen before. What does that mean? Cassie turned fully in her seat to face him, her back against the passenger door. Just say what you want to say, Mark. He pressed the brake suddenly, pulling the car onto the shoulder in a spray of dust and gravel. Fine. When he turned to her, his face was twisted with something like grief. You want truth? Your father was right about me, Cassie. I'm no good. She reached for his arm, fingers hovering uncertainly. I don't care what he interrupted her again. I killed a man back home. The words exploded from him like bullets. His eyes were wide, almost fevered in the dashboard light. That's why I had to leave. That's why I agreed to this whole marriage thing. I thought. His voice cracked. I thought maybe we could start over, leave all of that in the past. The world seemed to stop. Cassie stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, to say it was a joke or a test. But his eyes held nothing but awful sincerity. Take me back, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the idling engine. His brow furrowed in confusion. What? She pressed herself against the door as far from him as possible. To the diner. Take me back right now. Mark stared at her for a long moment, then wordlessly put the car in reverse, executing a sharp three-point turn on the empty highway. They drove back the way they had come, neither speaking. The diner should have been miles behind them, but somehow, after only a few minutes of driving, the neon sign appeared in the distance, pulsing its steady rhythm against the night sky. That's not possible, Mark muttered. We drove at least 20 minutes from there. But there it was, exactly as they had left it. This time, however, the parking lot wasn't empty. Several cars were parked haphazardly around the building, though none hadn't had their lights on. They pulled in beside a dusty station wagon and shut off the engine. The neon sign hummed overhead, casting alternating blue and pink shadows across their faces. Why did you want to come back? Mark asked. Cassie didn't answer. She was already getting out of the car, the door slamming behind her as she was drawn toward the diner's entrance, with a certainty she couldn't explain. Inside, the scene had transformed. Every booth was now occupied. Couples of all ages leaned across tables toward each other, faces intent. But something was wrong with the image. The people sat unnaturally still, and as Cassie looked closer, she realized they were all whispering. Endlessly whispering to each other across their tables. Their faces were strange. Some appeared cracked like old porcelain dolls. Others had skin that seemed to ripple and shift in the diner's fluorescent lighting, and none of them looked up when the bell chimed. Alton stood waiting for them, beside the only empty booth in the establishment. His smile was knowing now, almost triumphant. Back so soon? He asked, thin lips curving upward. How wonderful. Please, sit. Cassie felt her legs moving without conscious decision, carrying her to the booth. Mark followed, his expression dazed, shoulders slumped in defeat. They sat across from each other, and something cold and heavy seemed to settle around them like invisible chains. A strong marriage, Alton said, polishing a water glass with a pristine white cloth, his movements hypnotically precise, is built on complete and total honesty. Wouldn't you agree? Neither answered. They couldn't. Cassie felt words gathering in her throat, pressing painfully against her teeth, demanding release. Her hands trembled on the tabletop. Perhaps you'd like to share more truths with each other? Alton suggested, his voice soft as velvet. He placed freshly filled water glasses before them, the liquid inside impossibly still. No whispers to me this time. Speak directly to each other. Isn't that what marriage should be? Complete transparency? And suddenly, horribly, Cassie was speaking. I married you because I knew it would destroy my father, she said, the words tumbling out against her will. Her hands flew to her mouth but couldn't stop the flow. He said you'd ruin my life, and I wanted to prove him wrong so badly that I didn't care if he was right. Mark's eyes widened, pupils dilating in shock, but then his own confession burst forth. I enjoyed it, he whispered, horror in his voice. His fingers clawed at the tabletop, leaving faint scratch marks. When I killed him, I enjoyed watching the life drain out of him. Cassie felt sick, her stomach churning violently, but already another truth was forcing its way out. I was planning to leave you once we reached California, she said, tears starting to stream down her face. Take half our money and disappear. Mark barely flinched, a muscle twitching rhythmically in his jaw. I've been stealing from your savings account for months, he said, voice hollow. That's why we barely had enough gas money to get this far. Back and forth, the terrible truths flowed, each more devastating than the last. They couldn't stop the words, couldn't even look away from each other's faces as they systematically destroyed whatever fragile bond had existed between them. Around them, the other couples continued their own endless exchanges of whispered confessions, their faces frozen in varying expressions of horror, disgust, and despair. Dimly, Cassie became aware that the coyotes were howling just outside now, a chorus of mournful wails that perfectly underscored the destruction happening inside the diner. What is this place? She managed to gasp between confessions, her throat raw and aching. Alton, who had been moving silently between the tables, paused beside them. He straightened an already perfectly aligned fork. You know, no one's ever asked that, he said simply. Through the windows, Cassie could see headlights approaching in the distance. Another car, another couple about to stop at the only light for miles in the desperate darkness. How long? Mark asked, his voice raw from hours or perhaps eternities of speaking. His lips were cracked and bleeding from the endless stream of words. Alton gestured around the diner at the other trapped couples, his movements graceful and deliberate. Till death do you part, he said, and smiled his terrible smile. Isn't that what you promised each other? The bell chimed as the door opened, admitting a fresh pair of souls. Cassie tried to call out a warning, but only another confession emerged, and another, and another, as the neon sign pulsed like a heart that would never stop beating. Truth and secrets, opposite sides of the same poisoned coin. In the desert's unforgiving expanse, some find that honesty isn't the path to salvation, but rather the road to eternal damnation. For in the spaces between what we say and what we hide, entities wait patiently, collecting the debts we never knew we owed. The reservation. In the vastness of the cosmos, there are beings who watch and wait, beings who see our desperate need for validation as nothing more than an appetite to be satisfied. Tonight's tale examines one such hunger, served cold in this glimpse into madness. The Last Stop Diner sat like a forgotten toy at the edge of the Mojave, its neon sign flickering in fitful bursts against the purple dusk. A relic of better days when the highway still brought travelers instead of tumbleweeds. Its windows, cracked and clouded with desert grit, reflected the headlights of arriving vehicles as they pulled into the gravel lot. Inside, Gary Boone arranged folding chairs in a precise circle with the aid of several camping lanterns. His movements were practiced, almost ritualistic, as he positioned each seat exactly where it had been for the past 15 annual meetings of the Cosmic Visitors Society. The air smelled of dust and decades-old grease, mixed with the sharp tang of ozone that always seemed to permeate the air during these desert nights. Perfect, he muttered, stepping back to admire his handiwork. The sagging ceiling tiles and peeling wallpaper didn't matter. The graffiti scarring the restroom doors didn't matter. What mattered was the ritual, the ceremony, the summoning. And this year would be different. Gary reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a card that seemed to shimmer even in the diner's sickly, fluorescent lighting. Its surface rippled with iridescent patterns that moved like oil on water. He smiled, tracing his finger over the strange symbols embossed on its face. After all these years, he whispered, they've finally answered. The door chimed as the first of his followers arrived. Eleanor, the retired librarian who'd been with the group since the beginning. Her eyes, magnified behind thick glasses, immediately found the card in Gary's hands. Is that it? She asked, voice trembling with excitement. The invitation? Gary nodded solemnly. Authenticated it myself. The spectrographic analysis confirms it's not of this world. What Gary didn't mention was that the analysis had been conducted with a child's science kit in his garage, or that the invitation had appeared on his doorstep after a night of mixing prescription medication with cheap whiskey. Some things were better left unsaid when you were the leader of a dwindling UFO enthusiast club. One by one, the other members filtered in. Each greeted Gary with the reverence of congregants before their pastor. Each gazed at the shimmering card with hungry eyes. Tonight, Gary announced once everyone was seated, we make contact. A murmur rippled through the circle. Tina Wright, the newest member, barely 25 and still wide-eyed with belief, raised her hand timidly. "How do you know they'll come?" she asked. Gary's smile was condescending. "Because, Tina, they told me so. Right here." He tapped the card. "They've chosen this date, this location, this group." What he meant was, they've chosen me. Outside, the desert wind rose, carrying that strange metallic scent that seemed stronger tonight. The diner's lights flickered once, twice, stabilized. "Let us begin," Gary intoned, placing the card on a small table at the center of the circle. The ritual was the same as always, chanting nonsense syllables Gary had cobbled together from science fiction movies, raising arms toward the ceiling at carefully choreographed moments of silence to receive cosmic vibrations. But tonight, Gary added new flourishes, gestures that matched the symbols on the card, phrases that had come to him in dreams. The others followed his lead, as they always had, because Gary had conviction, Gary had certainty, Gary had promised them, year after year, that the visitors would eventually come. It was during a particularly enthusiastic arm wave that the lights went out completely. A collective gasp filled the darkness. Then, a new light, coming from outside, washing through the windows in silent, pulsing waves of blue-white radiance. Someone whispered, "It's happening." Gary felt his heart hammering against his ribs. A shape descended from the night sky, silent, smooth, disc-shaped with a gentle dome on top, exactly as described in 1,000 abduction stories. It settled onto the gravel lot with impossible grace, hovering just inches above the ground. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was Eleanor's asthmatic breathing. "Well?" Tina finally broke the silence. "Isn't this what we've been waiting for?" Gary swallowed hard. Yes, of course." He straightened his posture, adjusted his jacket, leader mode, ambassador mode. I'll go first to ensure it's safe." He moved toward the door, legs suddenly heavy as lead. Behind him, the others began to whisper excitedly, but Gary barely heard them. His mind was racing, tumbling between triumph and terror. Real aliens. Here. Now. Because of him. The night air hit him like a slap, cold and electric. The ship, because what else could it be, hummed softly, its surface rippling with the same iridescent patterns as the card. A seam appeared in its side, widening into a doorway of light. And they emerged. 3 figures, child-sized and slender, with oversized heads and enormous liquid eyes. Their skin glowed with a subtle luminescence, and they moved with the careful deliberation of beings in unfamiliar gravity. They approached Gary, who stood frozen in the gravel. "Welcome." Gary managed, voice cracking. "I am the leader of the Cosmic Visitor Society. We've been expecting you." The creatures tilted their heads in perfect unison, their mouths, small and nearly lipless, curved into gentle smiles. By now, the other members had gathered behind Gary, gawking at the visitors with expressions ranging from awe to terror. The aliens regarded them all with those enormous, reflective eyes. "Selection process?" another alien asked, gesturing toward the group. Before Gary could respond, the diner door burst open again and the remaining members poured out, jostling for position. "I volunteered first," Eleanor insisted, pushing forward. 20 years ago. I've been waiting longest." "I have the purest spiritual vibration," countered Thomas, the self-proclaimed psychic. "My consciousness is already calibrated to their frequency." Bickering erupted among them, old rivalries and jealousies bubbling to the surface as each tried to position themselves as the obvious choice for whatever was happening. Gary watched with narrowing eyes. This was his moment, his vindication after years of ridicule and dwindling membership, his proof that he wasn't just some crackpot laughingstock. "Friends," he said, raising his voice. "Friends, please." The group settled, turning expectant eyes toward him. "I've led this society for 15 years, Gary continued. "I've sacrificed my reputation, my career, everything for this moment." He gestured dramatically toward the aliens. "I received their invitation. I decoded their message." He paused, eyes sliding to Tina, who had stepped forward with an eager expression. "Though, of course," he added with practiced humility, "I would step aside if necessary, if someone else feels called." The aliens watched this performance with tilted heads and unreadable eyes. "I just think," Tina began, "since I've studied xenolinguistics, maybe I could." "Tina joined us, 6 months ago?" Gary interrupted smoothly. Her dedication is admirable, but untested. He lowered his voice to a theatrical whisper that he knew would carry. And between us, her theories on cosmic communication involve some very new age concepts that might be offensive to our guests. The damage was done. The aliens' gaze shifted from Tina to Gary, their expressions thoughtful. After a moment of silent communication, they gestured toward Gary. You, said the first alien, you will join us. Its voice conveyed something like fondness. Pride swelled in Gary's chest, nearly choking him. Vindication. Recognition. At last. What shall we call tonight's experience? One alien asked in a voice like wind chimes. Gary blinked, confused. Not exactly what he had expected. Oh, I'm Gary, that's my name. The aliens exchanged glances, then burst into what could only be described as delighted applause, their slender hands creating soft patting sounds as they clapped. They murmured approvingly in a language that sounded like water over stones. So, he asked, trying to sound casual, do you have like a levitation beam or something? The aliens tittered, a sound like glass wind chimes in a gentle breeze. No, friend. Please, walk aboard. A minor disappointment, but Gary nodded solemnly. He turned to the group, savoring their envious faces, their awed expressions. I go as your representative, he announced grandly. I will bring back knowledge to share with all humanity. He strode toward the ship, head high, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. The doorway of light engulfed him, and he found himself in a corridor that curved gently upward. The walls pulsed with soft bioluminescence, guiding him forward. The passage opened into a larger chamber, dimly lit by the same organic glow. As Gary's eyes adjusted, details emerged from the shadows. A long, gleaming table set with what appeared to be ornate cutlery, though no implement looked familiar. The pieces were curved and barbed and strangely organic, as if grown rather than forged. At the far end of the chamber stood another alien, larger than the others, its body bulbous and slug-like beneath a garment that might have been an apron. It turned at Gary's entrance, revealing a face dominated by a mouth full of glistening appendages. It held what appeared to be tools, sharp, curved things that gleamed wetly in the low light. It was drooling. Welcome, honored guest, one of the escort aliens said from behind Gary. You will be the centerpiece of tonight's experience. A cold realization washed over Gary like ice water. Not honored guest, just guest, as in dinner guest. As in, there's been a misunderstanding, he said, voice suddenly tight. I'm an ambassador, a diplomat, a representative of Earth. The aliens exchanged those same gentle, patient smiles. Of course, one soothed. Very important, very special. The large one, the chef, made a sound like bubbling liquid and gestured toward what Gary now recognized as a preparation area. Wait, Gary said, backing away. Listen, I can help you. There are others who would make more suitable specimens. I know where to find them. Healthier ones, younger ones. The aliens continued to smile their gentle smiles as they moved toward him, their movements now revealing a fluid strength that had not been apparent before. Please, Gary whispered. Please, I'm important. I'm special. I was chosen. Yes, agreed the alien. You were, by yourself. The hatch sealed shut with a soft hiss. Music, soft, ceremonial, filled the cabin. Gary felt gentle but firm hands guiding him toward the preparation area, his protests growing thinner and more desperate. Outside, beneath the desert stars, the remaining members of the Cosmic Visitors Society watched the ship with expressions of wonder and envy. He did it, Eleanor whispered. He really did it. Thomas watched in awe. I'm so jealous. A small hatch opened in the side of the craft, and one of the child-sized aliens emerged. It approached the group with that same gentle smile and extended a slender hand, offering a folded slip of paper to Eleanor. Next year's reservation form, it said sweetly, if you wish to dine with us again. Before anyone could respond, the alien retreated to the ship. The craft rose silently, its lights pulsing once, twice, before it accelerated upward at impossible speed, disappearing into the star-clotted sky. The desert fell quiet. In the distance, a coyote howled, a sound too similar to a human scream. Inside the diner, the lantern sputtered back to life. The sudden lights shook Tina. Dine with us? What's that supposed to mean? Eleanor asked. Tina snatched the invitation from Eleanor's hand. I can't even imagine the kind of crazy food these guys are into. Thomas chimed in. Yeah, maybe next year they'll take the rest of us. Tina nodded. It won't hurt to ask. The universe has its own food chain, with predator and prey engaged in an eternal dance of consumption. Gary Boone discovered too late that self importance makes for poor armor, but excellent seasoning.